She had picked up her wand from the table, and it had emitted a loud squeak and turned into a giant rubber mouse. "One of their fake wands again!" she shouted. "How many times have I told those two not to leave them lying around?" She grabbed her real wand and turned around to find that the sauce on the stove was smoking. "Come on," Ron said hurriedly to Harry, seizing a handful of cutlery from the open drawer. "Let's go and help Bill and Charlie." They left Mrs. Weasley and headed out of the back door into the yard. They'd only gone a few paces when Hermione's bandy-legged ginger cat Crookshanks came pelting out of the garden, bottle-brush tail held high in the air, chasing what looked like a muddy potato on legs. Harry recognized it instantly as a gnome. Barely 10 inches high, its horny little feet pattered very fast as it sprinted across the yard and dived headlong into one of the Wellington boots that lay scattered around the door. Harry could hear the gnome giggling madly as Crookshanks inserted a paw into the boot, trying to reach it. Meanwhile, a very loud crashing noise was coming from the other side of the house. The source of the commotion was revealed as they entered the garden and saw that Bill and Charlie both had their wands out and were making 2 battered old tables fly high above the lawn, smashing into each other, each attempting to knock the others out of the air. Fred and George were cheering, Ginny was laughing, and Hermione was hovering near the hedge, apparently torn between amusement and anxiety. Bill's table caught Charlie's with a huge bang and knocked one of its legs off. There was a clatter from overhead, and they all looked up to see Percy's head poking out of a window on the second floor. "Will you keep it down?" he bellowed. "Sorry, Percy," said Bill, grinning. "How are the cauldron bottoms coming on?" "Step back then," said Percy clavishly, and he slammed the window shut again. Chuckling, Bill and Charlie directed the table safely onto the grass, end to end, and then, with a flick of his wand, Bill reattached the table leg and conjured tablecloths from nowhere. By 7 o'clock, the 2 tables were groaning under dishes and dishes of Mrs. Weasley's excellent cooking, and the 9 Weasleys, Harry and Hermione, were settling themselves down to eat beneath a clear, deep blue sky. To somebody who had been living on meals of increasingly stale cake all summer, this was paradise. And at first, Harry listened rather than talked as he helped himself to chicken and ham pie, boiled potatoes and salad. At the far end of the table, Percy was telling his father all about his report on cauldron bottoms. "I've told Mr. Crouch that I'll have it ready by Tuesday," Percy was saying pompously. "That's a bit sooner than he expected it, but I like to keep on top of things. I think he'll be grateful I've done it in good time. I mean, it's extremely busy in our department just now, what with all the arrangements for the World Cup. We're just not getting the support we need from the Department of Magical Games and Sports. Ludo Bagman." "I like Ludo," said Mr. Weasley mildly. "He was the one who got us such good tickets to the Cup. A bit of a favour. His brother Otto got into a spot of trouble. Lawnmower with unnatural powers. I smoothed the whole thing over." "Oh, Bagman's likeable enough, of course," said Percy dismissively. "But how he ever got to be head of department without learning to Mr. Crouch. I can't see Mr. Crouch losing a member of our department and not trying to find out what's happened to them. You realise Bertha Jorkins has been missing for over a month now. Went on holiday to Albania and never came back." "Yes, I was asking Ludo about that," said Mr. Weasley, frowning. "He says Bertha's got lost plenty of times before now, though I must say if it was someone in my department I'd be worried." "Oh, Bertha's hopeless, all right," said Percy. "I hear she's been shunted from department to department for years, much more trouble than she's worth, but all the same, Bagman ought to be trying to find him. Mr. Crouch has been taking a personal interest. She worked in our department at one time, you know, and I think Mr. Crouch was quite fond of her, but Bagman just keeps laughing and saying she probably misread the map and ended up in Australia instead of Albania." However, Percy heaved an impressive sigh and took a deep swig of elderflower wine. "We've got quite enough on our plates at the Department of International Magical Cooperation without trying to find members of other departments too. As you know, we've got another big event to organise right after the World Cup. He cleared his throat significantly and looked down towards the end of the table where Harry, Ron and Hermione were sitting. You know the one I'm talking about. He raised his voice slightly. The top secret one. Ron rolled his eyes and muttered to Harry. He's been trying to get us to ask what that event is ever since he started work. Probably an exhibition of thick-bottomed cauldrons. In the middle of the table, Mrs. Weasley was arguing with Bill about his ear, which seemed to be a recent acquisition. With a horrible great fan of it. Really, Bill? What do they say at the bank? No one at the bank gives a damn how I dress as long as I bring home plenty of treasure, said Bill, patiently. And your hair's getting silly, dear, said Mrs. Weasley, fingering her wand lovingly. I wish you'd let me give it a trim. I like it, said Ginny, who was sitting beside Bill. You're so old-fashioned now. Anyway, it's nowhere near as long as Professor Dumbledore's. Next to Mrs. Weasley, Fred, George and Charlie were all talking spiritedly about the World Cup. It's good to be Ireland, said Charlie thickly through a mouthful of potato. They flattened to ruin the semi-finals. Bulgaria have got Victor Crumb. Oh, so, said George. I wish I had Paris. What happened? Said Harry eagerly, regretting more than ever his isolation from the wizarding world when he was stuck in Greenwich Drive. Harry was passionate about Quidditch. He had played a sicker. He had played a secret, but no one else reached him ever since his first year at Hogwarts, and earned a firefight, one of the best racing crews in the world. Went down to Transylvania, 390 to 10, said Charlie gloomily. Shocking performance. And Wales lost to Uganda. Scotland was slaughtered by Luxembourg. Mr. Weasley conjured up candles to light the darkening garden before they had their pudding, homemade strawberry ice cream. And by the time they had finished, moths were fluttering low over the table, and the warm air was perfumed with the smells of grass and hyacinth. Harry was feeling extremely the peace of the world as he watched several gnomes sprinting through the rose bushes, laughing loudly and closely pursued by Crookshanks.
Your gentle not being paid.
The family were all busy talking. Then he said very quietly to Harry, So, have you heard from Sirius lately? Hermione looked round, listened closely. Yeah, said Harry softly. Twice. He sounds okay. I wrote to him the day before yesterday. He might write back while I'm here. He suddenly remembered the reason he had written to Sirius and, for a moment, was on the verge of telling Ron and Hermione about his scar hurting again and about the dream. But he really didn't want to worry them just now. Not when he himself was feeling so happy and peaceful. Look at the time, Mrs. Wilson. Check the wristwatch. You really should be in bed, the whole lot of you. You have to crack a door to get to the cup. Harry, if you leave your school list out, I'll get your things for you tomorrow in Diagon. I'm getting everyone else's. There might not be time after the World Cup. The match went on for 5 days last time. Wow, hope it does this time, said Harry enthusiastically. Well, I certainly don't, said Percy sanctimonious. I shudder to think what the state of my in-trade would be if I was away from work for 5 days. Yeah, someone might slip dragon dung in it again, eh, Percy? Said Fred. That was a sample of fertilizer from Gaunt, said Percy, turning very red in the face. It was nothing personal. It was. Fred whispered to Harry as they got up from the table. "We sent it."
What?
Chapter 6. The Portrait. He felt as though he had barely laid down to sleep in Ron's room when he was being shaken awake by Mrs. Weasley. "Time to go, Harry dear," she whispered, moving away to wake Ron. Harry turned around for his glasses, put them on and sat up. It was still dark outside. Ron muttered indistinctly as his mother roused him. At the foot of Harry's mattress he saw two large, dishevelled shapes emerging from tangles of blankets. "It's time already," said Fred groggily. They dressed in silence, too sleepy to talk. Then, yawning and stretching, the four of them headed downstairs into the kitchen. Mrs. Weasley was stirring the contents of a large pot on the stove, while Mr. Weasley was sitting at the table checking a sheaf of large parchment tickets. He looked up as the boys entered and spread his arms so they could see his clothes more clearly. He was wearing what appeared to be a golfing jumper and a very old pair of jeans, slightly too big for him, and held up with a thick leather belt. "What do you think?" he asked anxiously. "We're supposed to go incognito. Do I look like a muggle, Daddy?" "Yeah," said Harry, smiling. "Very good." "Where are Bill and Charlie and Percy?" said George, failing to stifle a huge yawn. "Well, they're apparating, aren't they?" said Mrs. Weasley, heaving the large pot over to the table and starting to ladle porridge into bowls, "so they can have a bit of a lie." Harry knew
What do I
that
have to deal
apparating
with
was very
now?
difficult. It meant disappearing from one place and reappearing almost instantly in another. "So they're still in bed," said Fred grumpily, pulling his bowl of porridge towards him. "Why can't we have too?" "Because you're not of age and you haven't got your test," snapped Mrs. Weasley. "And where have those girls gone to?" She bustled out of the kitchen and they heard her climbing the stairs. "You have to pass a test to operate?" Harry asked. "Oh, yes," said Mr. Weasley, tucking the tickets safely into the back pocket of his jeans. "The Department of Magical Transportation had to fine a couple of people the other day for apparating without a license. It's not easy, apparition, and when it's not done properly, it can lead to nasty complications. This pair I'm talking about mental splinch cells." Everyone around the table except Harry winced. "Splinched," said Harry. "They left half of themselves behind," said Mr. Weasley, now spooning large amounts of treatment into his porridge. "So, of course, they were stuck. And by the way, had to wait for the accidental magic reversal squad to sort them out. And a fair bit of paperwork, I can tell you, what with the muggles who spotted the body parts they left behind." Harry, with a sudden vision of a pair of legs and an eyeball lying about on the pavement of Greenwich Drive. "Were they okay?" he asked, startled. "Oh, yes," said Mr. Weasley, matter-of-factly. "But they got a heavy fight, magic, and they're trying it again in a hurry. Don't mess around with apparitions. Just adult wizards who don't bother with it. They're movements, slower but safer. But Bill and Charlie and Percy could all do it." "Charlie had to take the test twice," said Fred, grinning. "He failed first time. Apparated 5 miles south of where he meant to, right on top of some poor old dear doing her shopping, remember?" "Yes, well, he passed second time," said Mrs. Weasley, marching back into the kitchen amid hearty sniggers. "Percy only passed 2 weeks ago," said George. "He's been apparating downstairs every morning since, just to prove he can." There were footsteps down the passageway, and Hermione and Ginny came into the kitchen, both looking pale and drowsy. "Why did we have to be up so early?" Ginny said, rubbing her eyes and sitting down at the table. "We've got a bit of a walk," said Mr. Weasley. "Walk?" said Harry. "What, are we walking to the World Cup?" "No, dear, that's miles away," said Mr. Weasley, smiling. "We only need to walk short. It's very difficult for a large number of wizards to congregate without attracting muggle attention. We have to be very careful about how we travel the best of times, on a huge occasion like the Quidditch World Cup." "George!" said Mrs. Weasley sharply. They all jumped. "What?" said George, in an innocent tone that deceived nobody. "What is that in your pocket?" "Nothing." "Don't you lie to me." Mrs. Weasley pointed the wand at George's pocket and said, "Axia." several small, brightly coloured objects zoomed out of George's pocket. He made a grab for them, but missed, and they sped right into Mrs. Weasley's outstretched hand. "We told you to destroy them," said Mrs. Weasley furiously, holding up what were unmistakably more tum-tum toppings. "We told you to get rid of the lot. Empty your pockets. Go on, both of you." It was an unpleasant scene. The twins had evidently been trying to smuggle as many Toppies out of the house as possible, and it was only by using her summoning that Mrs. Weasley managed to find them all. "Accio! Accio! Accio!" she shouted, and Toppies zoomed from all sorts of unlikely places, including the lining of George's jacket and the turn-ups of Fred's jeans. "We spent 6 months developing those," Fred shouted at his mother as she threw the Toppies away. "Oh, a fine way to spend 6 months! You wondered if we could get more over than else." All in all, Mrs. Weasley still glowered as she kissed Mr. George.